Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and thank you for watching. About a year ago, I did a video on working in Saudi, and at that time it felt like I'm mostly trying to convince people that it is not as scary as it could seem from outside, that it's safe and what are the advantages and stuff like this. Today, first of all, this is still a very hot topic in terms of working in Middle East. Second of all, this is the most frequently asked question, like how can I get a job in Saudi? So now I definitely don't need to, sell this destination or talk about its advantages, because this is something very in demand right now. But I wanted to talk about current situation in Saudi and the trends that I see that may influence your decision on whether you want to go and work there or somewhere else. So if you're interested, let's begin. Trend number one is that Saudi is still happening. It's still expanding, the hospitality sphere is growing. I see that so many brands that were represented all over the world and Middle East, like in Dubai, in Qatar and Bahrain, they are now keep moving to Saudi. We see a lot of pre-openings, and we could be sure that this dynamic will carry on, so there will be more and more opportunities, unless of course something absolutely force majeure happens. So there are ways to grow and there are tons of opportunity in Saudi still, and this will be the trend for nearest years as well. So if you want to develop a career, if you want to work in a growing market, this is still a good time to put your foot in the door, and I'm sure there will be a lot of chances for you to grow. Trend number two that I see, and this is kind of a negative one, I see that a lot of candidates are going to Saudi the same way that they used to do in Dubai. Like they take any kind of job and then trying to change it while being in Saudi. And this is a bad trend, because in Saudi the visa process is a little bit different. By all means, it is possible to transfer, and it's easier to transfer when you are inside the country. But the thing is, to do that, you need an approval from your employer. And from what we see, there is shortage of staff in Saudi, so employers are not as easy to let you go if you find a new job. So you can find yourself in a situation when you come there, you work for 3 months and you didn't really wanted to work in that company, but then you're trying to leave and the company just does not sign you permission for transfer. So this way you would have to cancel your contract, and to reissue your visa you will have to go back to your home country, wait another month or two while your new visa will be processed, and only then come back to Saudi. And this would make literally no sense, because you would spend all your money that you earned during these few months while you're back at home waiting for your new visa. In other countries, like in Dubai and Qatar, it's a little bit easier, because most of the companies there well established and they have their team packed. Of course, there is always some recruitment going on, but in Saudi, most of the companies are new and most of the companies are looking for people, and as they go through much more trouble to issue a visa for you than, let's say, employer in Dubai, they are not as easy to let you go. So my advice here would be, if you want to work in Saudi, go in there for any position just to, get in there, and then trying to switch the job there. Maybe not the best strategy, because it could work, but chances are you will have more issues with that, rather than you wait a little bit and find what you're looking for from the very beginning. So this is something that I wanted to share, because I see a lot of candidates that get new offers even through our companies, and they okay, yeah, no problem, my employer will give me the transfer, but then when it comes to it, I cannot transfer because my employer doesn't let me go. Of course you can go, but there will be a fee, and this usually is not something very small and that people are willing to pay. Just keep that in mind when you're making a decision about the position. I always recommend, this is my truth, to rather look a little bit longer for the job, but find exactly what you need. Trend number 3, Saudi seasons. This is probably like the most asked question. When in 2019 Saudi opened its doors to like expats and workers from different countries for tourists, they started this great, absolutely mesmerizing event, Saudi seasons. This is kind of like bunch of events in event. So the festival consists of like 3 months non-stop events in different areas, like conferences, concerts, anything you think of, name it, it was in Saudi seasons. And Saudi seasons, it was like a Riyadh season, Jeddah season, Alula season. So it moved from location to location, and it's basically just like a lot of events in 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, depending on the length of the season. But now I see that Saudi seasons becoming lesser of a deal than it was before. The scale is going down, and the reason for that, I think that in the beginning there was a shortage of restaurants for that huge amount of tourists that were coming to Saudi seasons. And now 3-4 years in, we can see that a lot of companies that originally came as a pop-up, as a like temporary restaurant, just to introduce their brand, just to try out the market, now they're opening the permanent restaurants. So there is no need for pop-ups anymore. Of course, there's still some, but it's not as massive, it's not as common, it's not as needed as it was before. I know this may upset a lot of you, but I see that Saudi seasons are moving away from short-term contracts, and more companies are willing to sign a year or 2 year contracts with the candidates. And if they need some people to like just straighten the team, then there will still be some short-term contracts, I'm sure, for next few years. But it will be not as massive and not as easy to get as it was before. So, sorry, but Saudi seasons still a thing. And as an event, it will continue to be a thing, but as a short-term contracts for hospitality workers, it's becoming smaller and smaller. Trend number 4. I know that most of candidates who choose Saudi over other Middle East countries as a destination to work do it because the salaries there are higher than in other countries. But also the 4th trend is about the fact that the salaries are settling down. Why Saudi suggested such a high salaries in the beginning? Because they knew that this is a new destination, nobody knows it. People may be afraid to go, and they needed a lot of stuff very quickly because there was like thousands of people that were needed for like short-term contracts and then for long-term contracts. Plus, they also were targeting people who already worked in Middle East, so the expectations of those people are usually a little bit higher. And for them to move from Dubai, let's say, to Saudi, they needed like a very good, strong motivation. Now, as the market is slowly settling down and getting more and more saturated with workforce, it's no longer as needed as before. And I see that even for like Saudi seasons, the salaries were for short-term contracts are like way higher than for long-term contracts. But now they are kind of the same. Of course, there are some companies that still may offer a bigger salary, but again, this is fine dining restaurants with very, very high requirements. Fluent English, working in Middle East for a few years, working in fine dining restaurants with like knowledge of all the services. So it is way harder to get this kind of job. We work with a few very big groups in Saudi that are having both long-term contracts, and they also have some pop-ups here and there. And we see that they provide the same salary. So it does not make any difference now whether you go for short-term contract or for long-term contract. And even more, in lower scale restaurants, in casual dining or some local brands or even the international hotel chains, the salaries are pretty much almost the same as in Dubai. Maybe a little bit higher, but I guess in long term, not maybe this year, not next year, but in the long term, they will even out as they did in Dubai, in Qatar, in Bahrain, in Oman, in Kuwait. The salaries are pretty much the same. So this is where we headed with the salaries in Saudi. But again, right now, the salaries are higher than anywhere in the Middle East on the hospitality market. So there is still a chance for you to go and take advantage of that. Trend number 5, and this is again about candidates' preferences and something that I wanted to point out because I think that this kind of mindset does not serve you well. So I just wanted to mention that and talk it through. I see that starting from 2019, so many people are looking and waiting for Saudi seasons jobs only. Like, I don't want to go for 1 year, I want to go for a few months. I understand the reasons for that. First of all, it's easier to commit for a few months. Second of all, it's still a decent money, even though it's same with long-term contracts. But if you really have only a few months, this is a good option for you. And third, this is the only short-term contracts in Middle East that you can get for some kind of events, and they are not happening as often as like in other countries. So Saudi, this is the place where it's still a possibility. But the downside of this urge for fast money is that the experience in Saudi seasons does not really count for anything when you apply for like a regular contract. Why? The same reason why people like it so much, because it's pretty easy to get in. The interviews are very quick and the decisions made very quick, and usually you fly in very quick, and the requirements are not as high. But this is exactly why it does not matter in future that you worked in a season or 2 or 3. For next employer that will be looking at your CV, he or she will see that you have a commitment issue, so you don't want to commit for a full year, let's say, of a contract. You go for a few months only. This is the first. Second is that during this time, none of the pop-ups invest as much time in learning process as they do in full-time contracts, because of course you're there for 3 months only, and even if you cannot do your job well, you do it like you do it, and then you just never get the job offer again if you didn't pull it off. Where if you work for a year, let's say in a fine dining restaurant, you will go through trainings, you will learn how to do it properly, you will learn everything to know about the style of communication with the guests, you will learn how to handle different situations, you will learn different types of service. If you're planning in future to continue working in Middle East, in the Gulf countries, I really don't recommend to take a lot of short-term contracts, or just be prepared that if you will try after that to start your career, you will have to do a step down a little bit to get a job with a long-term contract. If you, let's say, worked as a supervisor for 3 months, but before that you didn't have a supervisory experience, and you're applying after that for like a long-term contract, most likely that you would need to go back to being a head waiter. And if you haven't worked in Middle East at all, and then you started working in Saudi seasons, even if you had a few of them, this definitely will benefit you, because you'll have an idea about how everything works, you'll have better English, but in the eyes of your possible employer, it still will be a very, very irrelevant experience. So what I want you to take out from this is that Saudi seasons is great, short-term contracts are very convenient, and depending on your goals, it could be exactly what you need. And I by no means want to discourage you to apply for Saudi seasons, but I also want you to always realistically evaluate yourself and your experience, and just give you an idea how that is considered from the HR perspective and why. So when you're looking for a job further, it will not be an issue or a surprise for you. I think that Saudi is on the path towards becoming a more cosmopolitan place and more comfortable place for people from different nationalities to live in, and I have a very strong belief in the hospitality sphere of that country. So if you're looking for a job in Middle East and you were hesitant, I think this is definitely not something that you would regret. It's a nice place, it's a safe place, it's a place with great opportunities, so maybe take that into account when you're making a final decision. As always, I hope this video was useful. Please subscribe to the channel. It's always very nice to see our community growing, and like the video, hit that bell button, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.